The Declaration of Independence is kept in a bulletproof case at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The temperature is controlled, the humidity is monitored. Guards watch it 24 hours a day. It's been stolen once, hidden during World War II, protected like a sacred relic. We celebrate it every 4th of July. Politicians quote it constantly, school children memorize it, and we have never actually fulfilled it. Not in 1776, not in 1865, not in 1965, and not today, in 2026. I'm going to prove it, and I want to know, what's your view? I'm Amanda Harrison, and I just published a book called Freedom Unfinished. It's about 250 years of American history. What freedom has actually meant, who it's included, who it's excluded, and why the promise made in 1776 remains unfinished. This is the first video in a series where I'm going to take you through that history. Not the sanitized version you learned in school. The real version. The uncomfortable version. And at the end of every video, I'm going to ask you, what's your view? Because this isn't just history. This is about right now. About the choices we face. About what freedom means and who it's for. Let's start at the beginning. July 4th, 1776. The Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. You know the words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was radical for its time. It was a promise that everyone has rights that can't be taken away, that government exists to protect those rights, that when government fails, people have the right to change it. It was also a lie, not because the words were insincere, but because the promise was made to some people and denied to most people. Here's who could actually exercise freedom in 1776. White men who owned property. That was it. That was about 6% of the population. Everyone else? Excluded. Enslaved people, nearly 20% of the population, were property, not people. They had no rights. Women, half the population, couldn't vote, couldn't own property in their own names in most places, couldn't serve on juries, couldn't hold office. They existed under a legal doctrine called coverture, which meant married women had no legal identity separate from their husbands. Indigenous peoples, the original inhabitants of this land, were labeled in the Declaration itself as merciless Indian savages. They were being systematically displaced, killed, and erased. Poor white men without property couldn't vote, excluded. So when Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal," he meant it. He just had a very specific definition of men. And here's the kicker. Jefferson himself owned over 600 enslaved people in his lifetime. George Washington owned 317. Benjamin Franklin owned enslaved people. James Madison owned more than 100. The men who wrote "All men are created equal" were slaveholders. That's not a minor footnote. That's not an uncomfortable detail we can skip over. That's the founding contradiction of American freedom. They knew it too. They debated it. Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration included a passage condemning slavery. The Continental Congress cut it. They chose to compromise with slavery to get Southern states on board. They chose union over freedom. They chose political expediency over the promise they were making. And that choice haunted, and still haunts, American history. Here's what I learned writing this book. American freedom is always contested. Every generation has fought over who it includes and what it means. The promise made in 1776 wasn't fulfilled and then preserved. It's been expanded, betrayed, fought over, revised, and expanded again, over and over, for 250 years. Let me show you the pattern. 1776. Freedom declared, but only for white property-owning men. 1787. Constitution ratified. Protects slavery in 3 separate clauses. Creates the government. Doesn't mention freedom or equality. 1865. 13th Amendment abolishes slavery after a war that killed 600,000 people. Finally, freedom is legally universal. Except 1877. Federal troops withdraw from the South. Reconstruction collapses. Jim Crow begins. Black Americans are stripped of voting rights, segregated, terrorized through lynching. Legal segregation lasts almost a century. 1920. 19th Amendment. Women can finally vote. After 72 years of organizing. But not all women. Black women in the South still face Jim Crow barriers. 1964 to 1965. Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act finally dismantle legal segregation. Nearly 100 years after abolition. 2013. Shelby County decision guts the Voting Rights Act. Voter suppression returns. 2022. Roe v. Wade overturned after nearly 50 years. A constitutional right, gone. Expansion, backlash, progress, reversal. Do you see the pattern? Expansion, backlash, progress, reversal. Rights won, then contested. Freedom expanded, then rolled back. This isn't ancient history. This is ongoing. This is now. The promise made in 1776 has never been fully kept. It's always been contested. And right now, in 2026, it's under threat in ways we haven't seen in generations. Let me tell you why this matters right now. Why I wrote this book. Why I'm making this series. Because honestly, the threats to American freedom are real. Democracy is backsliding. Voter suppression laws are proliferating. Gerrymandering protects politicians from accountability. Disinformation spreads faster than truth. We had a violent attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, trying to overturn an election. The peaceful transfer of power, something we took for granted, was challenged. Economic inequality has reached levels we haven't seen since the Gilded Age. The top 1% owns more than the bottom 90%. People work full-time and can't afford rent. The American dream feels like a lie for millions of people. Climate change is an existential threat. And we're not acting fast enough because fossil fuel companies fund denial and politicians prioritize profit over survival. Rights we thought were settled are being rolled back. Roe v. Wade. Voting rights protections. Affirmative action. LGBTQ+ rights are under attack. Nothing is permanent. Technology is creating new forms of control. Surveillance is everywhere. Your data is being collected, analyzed, sold. Algorithms decide what you see, what you believe. AI makes decisions about hiring, lending, policing, often with bias baked in. This isn't alarmism. This is just what's happening. But here's what I also learned writing this book. Change is possible. Slavery seemed permanent. It ended. Women's suffrage seemed impossible. Women won it. Jim Crow seemed immovable. The civil rights movement dismantled it. What seems impossible becomes inevitable faster than anyone expects, when people organize, when they build power, when they refuse to accept the status quo. That's happened before. It can happen again. But only if we understand the history. Only if we see the patterns. Only if we learn from what worked and what didn't. That's what this series is about. Over the next 10 videos, we're going to explore the founding contradiction. How the founders enslaved people while declaring freedom, indigenous dispossession, the genocide and land theft that's still not acknowledged. Voting rights as a battlefield, the never-ending fight over who gets to vote. How every right you have was won by people who caused too much trouble. Freedom versus security. Why we lose both when we choose security. Whose freedom costs, when one person's freedom limits another's. Mass incarceration as the new Jim Crow. Digital surveillance and algorithmic control. And what we do next, because the work is unfinished. Every video will end with the same question. What's your view? I want to hear from you. I want debate. I want disagreement. I want all perspectives. Because freedom isn't something you're given. It's something you fight for. And fighting for it means engaging with the hard questions, the uncomfortable history, the choices we face. This isn't going to be comfortable, but it's going to be honest, and it's going to matter. Before we go, let me ask you directly, do you think America has fulfilled the promise of freedom? Are we living up to all men are created equal, or are we still falling short? And if we're falling short, what should we do about it? That's what I want to know. That's what this series is about. What's your view? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to go deeper, I wrote an entire book on this. It's called Freedom Unfinished. Link is in the description. It's available on Amazon. Next week, we're diving into the founding contradiction. How the men who wrote all men are created equal, owned, enslaved people. How do we reconcile that? Can we? Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And I'll see you in the comments. What's your view?